When I was a teenager, I didn't know a single adult who played computer games. But now, gaming is something millions of adults do every week. I think that change really started with the PlayStation, which marked a turning point in the games industry. As a teenager during the height of PlayStation's popularity, I got to grow up alongside it, and that made the 90s an incredibly exciting time to be into gaming. It wasn't just the leap forward in technology, it was the culture that grew around these consoles that made the era feel magical. The PlayStation launched against a backdrop of BritPop, lads mags and lager louts. For kids graduating from their Super Nintendos and Amigas, it was the perfect time to be a teenager. Everywhere you looked, this new youth culture was pushing its way to the front. It had a strong identity, and Sony slipped the PlayStation right into the middle of it. The covers of Amiga Weekly no longer held the same appeal as FHM, Loaded and Maxim. It was the beginning of a new era, for me and for the culture of the UK more generally. From the very beginning, Sony positioned the PlayStation as something completely different from the consoles that came before it. They were new to the market, which meant they could create an entirely fresh image for themselves without any of the baggage about what their brand already represented. They leaned heavily into youth culture, but also into the technical capabilities of the console itself. The move from cartridges to CDs, something that Nintendo stubbornly held onto with the N64, suddenly allowed for proper music, full motion video, and cinematic presentation in ways that older consoles simply couldn't match. The PlayStation was no longer just a toy for children, it was a serious piece of kit, and something that adults could appreciate too. Sony avoided the family-friendly marketing approach and targeted the 18 to 25 market directly. Their adverts are edgy, strange, and often deliberately confusing. They even invented fictional organisations like the Society Against PlayStation to reinforce the idea that the PlayStation belonged to a kind of counterculture. It's not something your mum and dad were supposed to be able to understand.
It's no longer about what they can achieve out there in your behalf, but what we can experience up here in our own time. It's called mental wealth.
Of course, this all sounds very cool, but where did I fit into it? I was a 13-year-old boy playing an Amiga 600 in the bedroom of a semi-detached house in a working-class area of Middlesbrough. I listen to Oasis and I read the odd magazine, but I don't actually live the lifestyle all of these magazines portray. For me, the entire marketing campaign was a fantasy. Playing a PlayStation wasn't suddenly going to turn me into one of the effortlessly cool people from the ads. And I think for a lot of people my age, the reality was something much smaller and much more ordinary. It wasn't coming home from the pub and playing Ridge Racer at 2 AM. It was playing football with your mates in the park before heading home for a game of FIFA or Pro Evo. It was staying up too late on a school night trying to beat a level, or wasting your Sunday afternoon in front of your parents' old CRT. So where did the PlayStation actually fit into my life? Ultimately, it still all came back to the games. But the PlayStation wasn't just about technical power or flashy features. It was about a feeling of time and place. It represented a shift in what games could be, and it established those expectations immediately. I mean, just listen to the first thing you hear when you turn the console on. After hearing that, expectations are already sky high. And when you'd grown up playing sensible World of Soccer before booting up FIFA 97 for the first time, genuinely felt like the future had arrived. Suddenly, there was real music, video, commentary from Des Lynam, and 3D graphics. It felt like the limitations had been lifted. Games like Wipeout perfectly captured the PlayStation's identity. Its futuristic visuals and nightclub-inspired aesthetic felt completely different from Nintendo's colourful mascots, while the soundtrack borrowed heavily from the electronic music scene expanding across the UK in the 90s. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater had a similar effect. For thousands of teenagers, it became a gateway to punk, ska, hip-hop and skateboarding culture. The soundtrack shaped the music tastes of an entire generation. And if you needed further proof that the PlayStation was no longer aimed at children, then a trip to Raccoon City in Resident Evil, or an hour with Silent Hill, will quickly convince you. Just a few years earlier, I'd refused to play Doom because I found its atmosphere too frightening, and that game had nothing on these. The PlayStation also saw the birth of Grand Theft Auto, and although it looks primitive compared to today's cinematic open world games, it still managed to cause outrage and controversy. Games also became a form of escape. Commentators on an earlier video of mine talked about how Final Fantasy VIII helped them through their GCSEs. Games became a place to retreat to during some of the awkwardness and pressure of teenage life. That mattered to millions of people. At the same time, this was still an era before online gaming really took over. Local multiplayer still mattered, and having two controllers was almost essential. In fairness, this was the one area where the N64 absolutely dominated. 4-player GoldenEye and Diddy Kong Racing felt revolutionary at the time, but luckily most friends had at least one person who backed the wrong horse and ended up with an N64. There were also no hard drives, no cloud saves, load times could be painfully slow, and memory cards were absolutely essential. Official PlayStation memory cards could hold a surprisingly small number of saves, and some games even took up the entire card to themselves, so most people ended up shelling out on a bigger third-party alternative from the local game shops. And those game shops mattered too. Before Amazon and digital downloads, buying games was a much more physical experience. You'd browse the shelves, look at the box art, pick up the magazines, stare at the games you couldn't afford, and occasionally you'd bump into your friends doing exactly the same thing. Unfortunately, the biggest problem with the PlayStation was the cost. Consoles were well over £100, and games could cost you up to £40. All that against my £5 a week pocket money simply wasn't realistic. Even the later Platinum releases at £20 could feel expensive. So at the time, it felt like playing the demo consoles in Toys R Us was the closest I was ever going to get to owning one myself. But the growing popularity of home computers and CD burners suddenly made gaming far more accessible, even if it was through slightly morally questionable means. You were no longer tied to those free demo discs and the odd big money purchase. Most of the CD swapping at school focused on albums downloaded from Napster, but games became part of the culture too. Having your PlayStation chipped opened up an entire underground world of copied games and disc swapping, and in my school it was absolutely everywhere. Everyone's dad, uncle or older brother seemed to know someone who could chip your console for you, and once it was done, the copy protection no longer worked, and suddenly games became affordable in a way they never officially were. Usually there was some bloke selling copy games for £10 each, eventually dropping down to £5, while somebody would be willing to burn a copy for you directly. I still remember buying huge spindles of blank CDs, and you'd slowly watch them transform into a stack of games and albums over the following months. Most of them just had the names scribbled on in black marker pen, though every now and again one of your mates would have one of those fancy CD printers and make something that looked a bit more proper. And all those kids I went to school with are now in their 40s, many with children of their own. We live in a different world now. Digital downloads have replaced disc swapping and piracy, and gaming communities have largely moved online. Nintendo still holds on to its family-friendly image and iconic franchises, but the battle between Sony and Microsoft continues to focus heavily on cinematic, mature gaming experiences. Series like Call of Duty, Gears of War, Uncharted, and The Last of Us would have been almost unimaginable to kids who grew up with Atari, Super Nintendo, and Amiga. People slightly older than us were always called the MTV generation, and in many ways we became the PlayStation generation. As I moved into college, university, and adulthood, I did eventually start living parts of the lifestyle that Sony had promised me in the 90s. Indie music, clubbing, and early 2000s nightlife all carried traces of the same culture that the PlayStation had tapped into years earlier. And even now, we've never completely left any of it behind. The attitudes, interests, and experiences we had as teenagers still shape who we are as adults. Maybe that's why nostalgia-driven content has become so popular online. Through emulation, YouTube, social media, we now get to revisit those moments and even pass small amounts of them onto our own children. For many of us, the PlayStation sits right at the centre of those memories.